Hello and welcome to the Garden Glow Up podcast. Today I'm here with Shelly Zacks from the Delray Beach Children's Garden. And Shelly, I'm so excited to talk to you today. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an absolute delight. I always say there's nothing better. The only thing better than being in the garden with the children is talking about the garden to people. So I'm happy to be sharing the
Yes,
story.
you really can't make gardeners stop, right? Like we're just going
It's
to
the
talk about
truth.
it. Whether you want to hear about it or not, we're going to talk about it.
It's true.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about children's gardens. And Shelly has so much experience doing this. As the name suggests, in Delray Beach, she has a children's garden where that it's just geared towards having children come and spend some quality time. So, Shelly, can you tell us what made you want to start a children's garden?
Okay, so I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, just like the very first suburb of Detroit. I was 2 blocks away from Detroit proper. And I I was very fortunate to be able to find my passion at a very young age. I know I have a lot of friends who are still looking for what it is they're supposed to be doing in this lifetime. And when I was young, just a child myself, I was really, really attracted to young children and they were attracted to me. So I knew that my life was always going to have young children around me. And I also had the second passion was digging in the dirt. So in Michigan, the soil is super rich because of the lakes that are all around, really dark, rich soil. And no one told me to, but I would sit in the garden, my mother's garden, and weed and plant seeds and just be in my happiest time when I was sitting in the dirt digging in the garden. So those two things came together to create the children's garden in the future. Have a master's degree in early childhood education. I worked as a director of a preschool, a couple of preschools, and then I had my children and I took a break, stayed home with the kids, but had gardens with my children. And whenever I was in a preschool setting, I was always doing gardening with the kids. So I was working with my very close friend Susan Caruso in her play-based um, preschool, her
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit, which is called Sunflower Creative Arts. And I was co-teacher with her for her first 9 years. And I just felt there was something else I was supposed to be doing besides just being a teacher with children. So I took a break and then got hired on as gardening consultant at another preschool and educational consultant there. Um, and during that time, I read a book called Last Child in the Woods, written by a man named Richard Louv. You might have heard of him. Many people know of him. He's coined the phrase nature deficit disorder. So
Okay.
the title of the book is Last Child in the Woods, Saving Children from Nature Deficit. So let me show you the book right here. I like to plug him because he was the reason
Yeah.
for the garden. So, yeah, well, this way.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, got
So,
it.
it's I had heard about people reading books and it changing their lives. Well, this certainly did. The book is about Richard traveling all over the country, interviewing young children on what they prefer being indoors or outdoors and why.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an overwhelming majority of children that wanted to stay inside instead of outside for many reasons.
Okay.
Mostly because of electronics and screens were inside, but also because it was cooler inside in the summer and because there was no place to go to play outside and because their parents wouldn't let them go outside without supervision. And after I read the book and closed the book, I just thought to myself, wow, my whole childhood passed before my eyes. And I remembered playing in the dirt, um, making salads from grasses and leaves,
Mm-hmm.
flowers at my grandmother's house and picking berries. And I thought, kids aren't going to get that anymore. So at the end of the book, it was kind of a bleak book in the beginning, but the end was very positive, talked about projects that were happening and coming up around getting children back outside and back in nature again. And I thought, well, Delray Beach is which is where the garden is, and which is where my children grew up. And I had at that time probably lived in Delray Beach for 25 years. This is the place. It's an up and coming place. It's a place where families are moving to, and it would be a great place for a garden. So eventually, it took me a while because I really didn't know how to start or how to begin. I've never been a founder of a nonprofit
Right.
before, but I kept talking about it, and everywhere I would speak about it, people would light up and say, "My gosh, that's an amazing idea." So it kept me going, and then I finally connected with another nonprofit that has um, similar qualities and similar mission as what my intention was. And so it was at the time called Aurora's Voice, currently called Soil and Soul. I like to plug
Okay.
them as well. They're an incredible nonprofit. We are now our own nonprofit. But for the first 2 years of the garden, they were incredibly helpful and allowing us to fundraise and get ourselves off the ground. So
Got it.
so I joined this nonprofit, and at the time they were building just a community garden, not a children's garden. So I had the experience of working and developing a
Hmm.
garden, and it was invaluable. And I met my co-founder, Jeannie Burnsworth there, who is a botanist and horticulturist. And she said, well, she loved the idea of the children's garden. She said, well, I think I have the perfect spot for it. She actually was a parishioner at St. Paul's Church, where the garden sits. It sits on their land currently on a half-acre plot.
Okay.
And we wrote a grant for a children's garden together, Jeannie and I. And we got the grant, the certificate for the grant, and signed the lease for the land on the same day.
How
So
wonderful.
we
You really
knew
manifested this.
it was really meant to be. And both of us agreed that in order for it to be successful, we need to involve community.
Yes.
So we created a steering committee. The very first thing we did was invite the community to a design charrette where we discussed the mission and the idea of the children's garden. And we had them gather in groups at 6 different tables where there were giant boards on the table, and they could we had a lot of stuff. There's a place called Resource Depot where you can get all kinds of over stuff that is free, and we
Hmm.
gathered it all, put it on a big table, and so told them to create children's gardens. So there were 6 groups. Of course, it was the evening. They were tired. They probably didn't want to be doing this. I could tell by their faces that, oh no, I've got to be with a group of people I don't know. And now they're
Right.
making me, but we
A
gave
group
them 40,
project.
we gave them 45 minutes to complete their garden. And at 45 minutes, we couldn't stop them. They were so engaged and so excited about the potentials, and, friendships were being made.
Aw.
Um, and then we surprised them with a group of children from age 7 to 17. It was a 17-year-old to come out as judges to critique their gardens that they built. And it was pretty amazing how articulate these little kids were,
Hmm.
in telling them what really was wanted and needed and what really wasn't necessary at all. So there
I
was a
re-
Go ahead.
sorry, sorry to interrupt. I've been to the garden, and Shelly has been so kind as to tour me around and tell me all about the garden. And I remember this very vividly because there's a portion of the garden that I remember you telling me was selected by these kids to for their reasons. Do you want to explain that?
Sure. So one of the children that was critiquing the designs said, and he was, I think, 9 years old, super precocious and
Yeah.
very tactful and very adorable. He said, parents think that they have to see their children when they're playing, but they don't really have to see us. We're okay without them seeing us.
Mm-hmm.
We would like to have places in a garden where the parents can see us.
Yes.
So there was a landscape architect at the charrette who volunteered to draw up the plans for the children's garden, and he was taking notes all the time and took notes of what the children said. And so in his design he included places where children could not be seen. Well, actually, they could be seen, but they felt like they
Right.
couldn't be seen.
R-
Like a banana forest was one of the
Yep.
features in it, where it's the section of the garden is filled with banana plants and papaya plants, and the
Mhm.
children they feel like they're in the woods. The whole
Mhm.
idea was to create a space for children where they would feel completely immersed in nature and love it so much and not want to leave it and grow up to want to protect it and save it. So that was
And
how the children's garden got started.
yes, and I think you covered a lot of facets that we've talked about with the banana garden, with the banana tree garden, because you're providing shade, which is one of the things that we like. I think even adults don't want to be out, like, being blasted by the sun. We're
Mhm.
we're in South Florida, for all of you who don't know where Delray Beach is, and like to be blasted by the sun all day is really hard. So when you create a banana tree garden that immediately provides shade, it gives kids the privacy that you were talking about. Like, I remember when you walked me through it and I was like, this is both so private and so open at the same time. And I could totally picture just like letting little kids roam around in here, and as a parent not feeling any type of way. And in Florida, banana trees are so easy. You plant like one or two and they just turn into groves. So from a gardener's perspective, it's really simple to do. From a parent perspective, you're covering so many bases with your kids. Like, that was such a great idea.
Yeah. So we have also other shady spaces. So when we got the plot of land, it was just an empty plot of land. This is
Mhm.
10 years ago.
Mhm.
10 years ago, we started building in 2015, February of 2015. So 10 years ago, it was the only thing we had was a line of mango trees, which was a great start, of course,
Mhm. Of
all
course.
along this one side of the garden. And there was one palmetto palm, which is a native, and there was also a sea grape in the corner. So
Mhm.
we had a little bit of a skeleton to build
Mhm.
around, but the rest of the garden was just blaring sun and no shade at all. But the amazing thing is that in Florida, things keep growing. They don't have a dormant season, they keep going all year long. So in 10 years, we have this nature oasis that you wouldn't believe only took 10 years to build. And we have about 50 fruit bearing plants on the property.
Mhm.
We have more shade because we built at the beginning. We decided we needed a gathering place, so we have this really large chickee hut, Seminole chickee hut, which
Mhm.
never needed permitting because there were Seminoles involved in the building of it. So we
Oh,
were
wow.
able to do it without permitting. That's one of the perks that Seminoles get from not being abused for so long.
Mhm.
So yeah, so we had shade from the hut. We started planting trees. We had one large mango that we put seeding around. We built a giant sandbox that's a very popular place for
Yes.
moms and their little ones to hang out. That was all in the beginning, and we had an herb garden. And the centerpiece of the garden, was built by a Boy Scout doing his Eagle Scout project, which was a labyrinth, is a labyrinth that
Mhm.
is also a vegetable garden. Because the landscape architect knew that I wanted a labyrinth, but everybody wanted the vegetable garden, so he combined the two together. So the boxes form a labyrinth, and in the center there's a stucco tree that a local artist put together. Um, and it's made of wire and stucco and has plumbing inside of it. And there's a hollow in the tree where the children can turn the water on, fill up the watering cans, and water the labyrinth. And we have this giant pipevine swallowtail, um, Dutchman's pipe, where the pipevine swallowtail butterflies lay their eggs, that is draped over the tree. So it actually looks like a real tree when I tell people it's not real.
I
They're
know.
really surprised
I've
by
seen it and it's amazing.
it. So let's
um
see what else. We have lots of other new features, because as the garden evolves, it never stays the
mhm.
same. And in
Mhm.
fact, you'll come back again another time, Amy, and you'll say,
Oh, yes.
"Wow!"
I
Because
believe it.
we have a mud kitchen now. I don't know if we had the mud kitchen then, did
Yes.
we? Okay.
Yes.
And we have a very beautiful water play station. We have a pond in the garden that was there from the beginning. That was one of the
Mhm.
features we wanted. It's got gambusia fish, which are mosquito larvae eating fish, and it has goldfish in it that the children love to feed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Lots of water plants surrounding it. It's a whole pond ecosystem there.
Yep.
Um, and we have a fairy garden, a new fairy garden. Were you there for the fairy garden too?
Yes, those
I
are
guess you
they're
were there not
beautiful.
so long
Yeah.
ago. We have a fairy garden with little fairy vignettes and lots of flowers and a little fountain in the center. And I'm trying to think of other things that I can share about the gardening.
Well, one of the things I remember, one of the biggest takeaways that I took from the garden, because we were working on a video and the video is on YouTube. I'll link it at the end for anybody who wants to see it. But one of the biggest takeaways I took as a parent was I should just put my kids' toys outside, because when I saw it was the mud garden that I remember, I looked at it and I was like, this is just like their little kitchen playset. Like, and you guys have it set up like you guys have a bigger setup, I would say, than anything I had in my house, but my kids had a kitchen and I was like, I should just put the kitchen outside. And so a lot of what I took from going to your garden was, if I just move some of their toys outside, it'll get them outside. Because I remember, I think you had like boards, like where they can write and stuff. And it's just outside.
Chalkboard.
Right. What kid doesn't have a chalkboard? They all have chalkboards. Just move it outside and it gets them, like if you just value being outside, which I do, it just gets them outside. And you don't necessarily have to build a whole garden. I think for those of us who have nice gardens, it's obviously because you value being outside and you want to lure the kids outside. So like I have the fruit trees you were talking about. And by the way, the fruit trees that at the Delray Beach Children's Garden were so cool. The one that stands out in my memory was the peanut butter fruit.
That's our signature tree. That was the first tree we
Yeah.
planted in the garden.
Can
And the
What's the
reason
name
why,
of that tree? I do remember it, but
I forget, it starts with a B. I forget it every single time. You guys will have to Google it to find out what the name
no
of it is.
problem.
It'll be your homework. But
But it was such a
what
cool little fruit. And I can
it's a
imagine the kids must go crazy over that.
they love it, and the adults do too. So it's so interesting because I was envisioning a children's garden, right? A place
Mm-hmm.
for children to be. But the families, the parents, the adults in the families are just as enamored by the garden as the children are. Maybe
Yeah.
more so in some ways, because children, everything is new to them in their
Yeah.
lives. So whatever they go into, we have families that come to the garden for the first time. The children just take off and play. They don't have
Mm-hmm.
their mouths hanging open and going, whoa, what is this? Because the garden is in the middle of downtown area. It's like a little oasis in downtown. And the first time adults that come in the garden, they walk through the gate and go,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
wow, because it just is really kind of so, well, first of all, it's incredibly peaceful. It just
Mm-hmm.
feels, it's my happy place for sure.
Mm-hmm.
If you walk in there, the rest of the world falls away and you're in this magical nature space. It's pretty remarkable.
It is. Why don't, because I know you mentioned having an educational basis with kids. So you mentioned having a master's degree
Right.
in education.
Mhm.
Have you seen any impacts on education from teaching outside in the garden with the kids?
Mhm. So if you speak to any of the people that work at the garden, any of the team members, they'll give you a different spin depending on what their passion is. So my passion has always been allowing children to experience what it feels like to be immersed in a nature setting. To me, that's the most important thing. The mission of the garden is to nurture eco-consciousness in
Mm-hmm.
children through garden education, nature exploration, and outdoor play. So like Christina Nicodemus, who is our director, but also an educator at the garden, her focus is science. That's her favorite thing of all
Mm-hmm.
to do. So she does incredible science projects with the kids. And Veronica, our programming director, is a children's book author. She's a vegan and she is promoting veganism through her children's books. It's pretty amazing. She has
Okay.
6 or 7 of them now. And her passion is taking food from the garden and cooking with the children. So that would be her way of educating. And then Kayla is an artist, so she does nature art with the children in the garden. Um, my favorite group in the garden, first of all, are the little ones, right? So I'm
Mm-hmm.
a teacher forever, my whole life, a preschool teacher. So that's what fills me up, being with those children in the garden. But we also have a group that I work with 2 Wednesdays afternoons a month called Roots and Shoots. And it's Jane Goodall's international program to empower children to feel like they can make a difference in the world. And we're the
Okay.
local venue for them. And they've been coming to us since the garden opened up. So they were 3 and 4 years old when they started, and now they're 13, 14 years old. And they know the name of every tree in the garden. They know the reason for growing natives in the garden. They know what a pollinating garden is and what pollinators are, and not just butterfly gardens, but pollinators.
Right.
They know about enriching soil, which for me is like the absolute most important thing that we need to do on
Mm-hmm.
the planet, is to um, heal our soil that is so sick. So they know about composting. They know about making soil, literally making.
Mm-hmm.
What else do they know about growing food from seed to the table? Right from seed, growing the seed to the table, and the children that come on Saturdays, that just maybe once a week, and come on our Saturday open play, they know where all the bugs are. They turn over the logs and explore and find the millipedes and the worms. And we have a worm hotel that's a very favorite place for people to
Yes.
explore. That's
I
another
can
one.
imagine kids really enjoying the worm hotel.
They do. They really do. And so do I. I
Yeah.
absolutely love our worms. They're my favorite part of the garden besides the young children. The worms are my favorite part of the garden. They are just incredible. And so it's a 3-level composting hotel where
Mm-hmm.
the composting worms are specific worms that come to the top, to the surface for food. So we keep the kitchen is on top. I tell the kids
Mm-hmm.
the kitchen, and we put our food scraps there. And then there's a resting place in the other 2 layers with shredded paper. And that's where they just go to rest, but they come up to eat the food. And within 6 weeks, we have a bin about this wide,
Yep.
this deep, and this deep of compost, of worm castings. And I love talking about worms with kids, because they hear an adult talk about worm poop, right?
Yeah.
We're their best friend, because we're talking about poop with them, and the benefits of poop and how wonderful poop is.
Yes.
Pretty cool.
I can imagine that a kid would really enjoy that.
Yeah, it's awesome. So and then we have a nature adventure program on Fridays. Every Friday, that's a new program that we add in. We have lots of new programs that we've added in since I've spoken
Mm-hmm.
to you last.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, if you go to the website, it's really easy to sign up for a class, because the first page lists all the class, and you can just click on the link and it'll allow you to sign up for it. So Mondays are our field trip days. Tuesdays are our Move and Groove program. It's a new program with
Okay.
Melissa, and she is amazing with music and songs and movement with children. She also does a little bit of yoga with them in the
That's
garden.
very cool. Yeah.
They use upcycled materials to make instruments, and they also have they're all every single program always gives time for exploration and play in the garden,
Mm-hmm.
because we found that that's all really they want to do sometimes, and if you don't give that to them in the beginning, it's hard to keep
Right.
in a group. So yeah, so
Right.
that's the moving groove. We've got that's Tuesdays. Wednesdays we have Veggie Bureau's cooking classes. Sometimes we have Alicia who comes and does apothecary with them, getting herbs from the garden and making little sachets.
Oh,
Um,
that's so cool.
Thursdays are Mother Nature and Me, my very favorite. We have an average of 40 kids that's just the children. Every Mother Nature and Me, that's about an average of 40 kids that come, and
Wow.
we have a story time during Mother Nature and Me that Veronica does with them. And we also have a craft underneath the hut that they can come and go to, and then just spend the rest of the time exploring in the garden. That's for kids ages 0 to 5. So that's our
Yes.
Mommy and Me class. And then Fridays are nature adventures, and then Saturdays we have open play. And we also have a monthly program for the high school kids, middle school, high school kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Smoothies and Service. So this is a new addition. The smoothies part is a new addition to the monthly service days that we used to do
Hmm.
with the high school kids, um, just to lure them in to do projects, community service projects. They get credit.
Oh, that's a great idea.
So we have smoothies available for them for their.
And then again, just getting kids outside, because even to do service projects, so many things are inside. When I hear you talking to me about the programming, one of the senses I get as a parent is these are just things that you would do with kids, but if you just take the activity outside, kids have so much more fun. You
They,
know, and yeah, and
they
it's so much more fun. It's when I take my kids outside, it's just less stress on the parent. Like the garden just entertains them. You know, like you don't have to do anything. So
That's
for
true.
instance, when my son was young, I was constantly looking for things to do with him to keep us both entertained, not,
Right.
for his sake, but also for my sake. And when my daughter was young as well, and to have a resource like this, which is essentially mommy and me time, or I think they used to like I don't know, what did you call it? What was the program name?
Mother Nature and Me, the Mommy and
Yeah,
Me
Mother
program.
Nature and
Mother
Me. There
Nature
you
and Me.
go.
Yeah.
So just to have that and take it outside puts a whole new spin on it, when really, you're just looking for ways to entertain your kid, and this is such an obvious way of doing it.
So it's very curious. Why is it
Mhm.
that people feel that children have a better time when they're outside or feel better when they're outside? This has always been a question mark in my mind. When I was a regular preschool teacher, if there was a child that was having a very hard day, and one of the staff members would take them out to the garden to look around, to smell the flowers,
Mhm.
it was like night and day by the time you brought them back inside. So there is something about nature, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of research. The Richard Louv, who wrote The Last
Mhm.
Child in the Book, created a nonprofit called Children and Nature Network, and there are, the last I looked, there were 6 volumes of research that show children do better, feel better, um, can perform better when they're out in nature, when they're outside. So it's true, and we have parents that come with their children who normally are attached to their leg and will not leave them,
Mhm.
come to the garden and just take off and don't even look to find where their parents are. Of course, the parents have to be paying attention to where their children are, but
Right.
but the children don't care because they feel safe when they're out in the garden and in nature. It's pretty remarkable. It is. Makes a big, big difference being outside versus inside for all
So,
kinds of children, for kids that
yeah.
are special needs, but also for everybody, for all of us. Don't you feel better when you go outside? I
Yeah.
do. I always feel better when I'm out of the inside and out of the air conditioning. It's it's just a different world. It's a different feeling.
And I think one of the things that I've heard a lot in these conversations, specifically surrounding children and being out in the garden, has to do with the tactile environment, just their ability to experience something like with their hands that they haven't necessarily put a lot of time and effort into, and how expanding that is for kids, because right now we really do have very inside lives. We live inside, we go to school inside, everything is inside, like you were saying. And so even just, that they can go explore in the garden and touch, the way you were saying, digging in the dirt, which is maybe once in our evolution was very, very normal, but today it's not. To just be like, oh yeah, I was outside for an hour or two and I spent some time digging in the dirt, that's not something we do every day. And just the tactile experience of being around the garden and touching things, and like, oh, that felt kind of gritty, is supposed to be so good specifically for children.
Definitely. So when I was in doing my master's in early childhood education so many years ago, they didn't have the technology now to measure what happens when children touch and feel and explore and are outside in a natural setting. Now there's so much technology that can measure, it was like a philosophy. Children do better in early years. It's good for them to play because play is good for them, right? Now,
Hmm.
all the brain research shows that in early childhood, the most important thing, not to learn their colors or their numbers or to read, it's to be outside in nature because the sensory aspect of nature creates neural pathways in the brain that can hold information later on. But
Hmm.
we feel like we need to be filling children with information, but that's really not what the research shows. The
Okay.
research shows that children's brains develop through play and through interacting with
Hmm.
their environment. And so the early childhood years really should be out in nature, um, for the first 7 years, even. And then their brains are developed enough to be able to sit and hold the information later on.
That makes a lot of sense. I think even the things we know from an institutional perspective, that like little kids need recess. Like they need just free time to go outside and not have to be standing in, like it all kind of blends in, but then when you add in the factor of the garden, I think it's inevitably just good for kids.
Definitely.
So what
It's
have you
really, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh, I
I
was
was
just going to say, it's just so much fun to see them in awe of nature because there is so much awe and wonder in nature. There's so many things. Everything you need to learn in life can be learned in a garden, right? There's nothing
right.
that can't be learned. So it's so much fun to just watch them exploring. And we have a lot of loose parts in building forts and just just wholly lost. And so our goal was to build a space where children would be immersed in nature and love it so much that they won't want to leave. Well, it's really happened. We've actually had to come up with a solution because we've had so many children throwing temper tantrums because they had to leave the garden.
Yeah.
So what we do is we offer the parent a wagon, giving the child a wagon ride to their car
Oh,
because that
how
kind of
cute.
shifts the
Yeah.
energy of I don't want to leave to a wagon ride. So, but
That's so smart, Shelly.
it's pretty good. It's pretty good that we created a wonderful
Yeah.
problem and now we have a
Yes.
good solution for it. Yeah.
And I do want to mention the whole time you've been giving us such good resources that I actually had to open a little notepad and start taking notes because I was like, I can't, later I'll forget. So as you've been talking, every so often I'll take a little note whenever you mention a resource. But I do have, I think, one last question, which is how, when parents go, do you notice a shift in the parents in the garden?
So it's interesting. The adults in the garden, it depends. The garden definitely attracts very conscious adults, adults that are looking for a nature space for the children.
Hmm.
But we often get new parents that are what's termed, not a modern term for it is helicopter parents, that they feel
Hmm.
like they need to hover over their children and be there and direct them. And we try to guide these parents into relaxing a little bit more, allowing the
Okay.
children to get dirty and explore. Getting if the best part of the day is watching dirty children leave, muddy, dirty, wet children leave the children's garden. So we encourage parents, if it's their first time and their children are getting wet, we encourage them to bring a change of clothes next time and
Hmm.
to let them know that it's incredibly important for them to be able to play in the dirt and dig in the dirt and explore. So we have some educating to do with some parents. I'd say the majority of the parents that come to the garden really definitely um, are on the same page. They really get it. They really know what this place is for and are really grateful for it. But we do have field trips. That's the most challenging is field trips
Okay.
because the teachers want the children, don't touch that. We have so in our garden we have so few no's. If there's something that's happening that we don't want to happen, we always redirect or we
Got it.
talk about a learning experience. So one thing we don't like to happen in the pond is children throwing things in the pond.
Okay.
So if there's a group that comes, we'll let them know that there's fish living in their pond. We don't want the fish to have things
Right.
thrown in their home. They live there.
Hmm.
So if we see a child throwing things in the pond, we'll redirect them to the water table and have them plop things into the water table, because really all they're doing is watching the ripple effect. When something
Right.
falls in there, it's a cause and effect.
Right.
They're not being naughty children by
Right.
throwing things in the pond. So we have to, with the schools that come, there are so many rules, and the teachers are responsible for all of these children. And I can tell that they're stressed, sometimes very stressed
Mhm.
out, and they're wanting the children to be soldiers, behave.
Mhm.
And so it's we have to let them know, these trees, we allow the children to climb these trees. These trees are for climbing. It's really important for children to take risks and try to climb the tree. If they can do it, we should
Right.
let them. And so there is educating parents to do and adults to do in the garden. Mostly it's usually the teachers come in with field trips, but every now and then we have parents that really don't get it, and we have to
Right.
give them a
I
little tutorial.
I do want to say when I went to the garden, it was a little bit far from me, which is the only reason I haven't been back in a little while. But when I saw the garden, I was like, what I wanted immediately, I was like, well, I'll invite my dad lives in the area. And I was like, I'll invite my dad. He'll come with us and we'll sit while the kids play because that's essentially what we do on the weekends anyway. Like the adults sit around while the kids play. And you had so many nice shady areas that were really just, if the adults just kind of want to sit and take a break in the outdoors, which is wonderful, while the kids are fully entertained, it's such a great space for that to just say, I sat under a tree, nice and cool. The kids were entertained, and what a great experience because there's so much to do in the garden. So when I was there, it really felt set up for families. Not yes, it's a children's garden, but the adults are going to have the time of their lives while they're there too. And like you said, I think as an adult, I was so in awe of everything. You just walk in and you're like, this is the most beautiful garden I've ever been to, and it's so well set up.
Aw, thank you for that, Amy. That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
the parents do get equal amounts that the children get from the garden. So I didn't know I was building a family garden, not a
Yeah.
children's garden. Really, it's the truth.
No.
And so many parents want to build what we have in
Yeah.
our garden in their yard. So we become
Yes.
their mentors, and it's like little ripple effect of creating nature in lots of spaces.
So, what advice do you usually give parents who want to do that?
We have a plant shop, a very small one. We want to make it grow, but we have some plants for sale. We'll get them started a little bit
Mhm.
at a time. We give them tours and give them names of the plants in the garden so they do know what's available, and they get to sample and taste so they can choose what they like. I talk about soil. I give them references too of places that we use, like um, Incredible Edibles, which is out in Loxahatchee.
Okay.
Tree Amigos. Do you know about Tree Amigos in Dayton?
Yes.
They're incredible young men that really are passionate about creating nature spaces, food forests for people, and it's a great resource. Tree Amigos. So we help them find the spots to find the plants, and um, I teach them about soil. I really think it's important that people realize that our soil is so depleted, especially in Florida.
Yeah.
And so you need to, in order to grow food, you really need to create soil. And it's fun.
Yeah.
It can be fun. It doesn't have to be a chore. It could be really fun.
Yeah. And I would go back to just put their toys outside. Like, I mean, that was for me, that was such a big takeaway when I saw everything you were doing. I was like, this isn't complicated. If you just take the things that they want to do and put it outside.
Exactly. Exactly. And, you can grow things in pots. You
Yeah.
don't have to have a huge garden. I know there's a lot of parents that come that live in apartments. They don't
Hmm.
have a yard, but they have
Right.
a whole balcony filled with pots of vegetables growing. My son in
Hmm.
Tulsa, Oklahoma, has pots everywhere with
Hmm.
lettuce and watermelons growing out of pots.
Wow. That's
You can
impressive.
you can definitely do it in pots, and you can start small, and the little ones,
Yeah.
give them seeds that are big enough that they can hold and
Yeah.
manipulate to plant, like sunflower seeds and beans. Start small. Start small, but then it becomes like Christmas. Every morning you wake up to see what there is, what kind of
Yeah.
prizes there are for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The kids really do. Anytime they plant something, they just love watching it grow. And seeing what course it takes is so interesting to them.
And they eat the food they grow, not
Hmm.
necessarily the food that you bring home from the grocery
Hmm.
store that they have no idea where it came from.
Right.
But when they grow it, they do eat it. In fact, I have a picture of a little boy in our children's garden going to one of the boxes that had broccoli in it and putting
Hmm.
his face into the broccoli and taking a bite of one of the
Oh, cool.
broccoli heads. Just took one big bite off the broccoli. This was maybe a not even 3-year-old walking over and
Right.
eating broccoli from the garden. So yeah.
That's great. Well, Shelly, at this point, I think it's time to start rounding it out. Is there anything in particular that you are promoting or any new programs that you specifically want listeners to know about?
We don't have any events coming right up and coming right now, but we do
Okay.
have a new set of classes that are on our website now, all the way through December. You can go to the website, delraybeachchildrensgarden.org,
Mhm.
and just click on the class that sounds the best for you. The first time you'll have to put in a little bit of information, but the second time you choose a class, you just click on it and you're in. So it's
Awesome.
really an amazing platform that we're using called Sawyer, and it's super easy to get to the garden. We're a block and a half um, south of Atlantic Avenue, behind the Delray Beach Library. Um,
Hmm.
the address is 137 Southwest Second Avenue, and we're right
Uh,
on. Go
we
ahead.
can put all the details in the description so that
Great,
if you're
great.
listening, you can find it. Don't worry. We'll
Okay.
link it all. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Amy. This was
Of
fun.
course.
So much
Yes,
fun.
it was such a good time. For the listeners, if you're I'm going to be opening a Shopify store soon, so check for that in the description as well. But with that, if you guys have any questions, let us know in the description. And Shelly, thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
coming and sharing this experience because I've been to the children's garden. It's been so amazing. I was really excited when we decided to do this to bring it to everybody so that they could hear how it was formed and all the success you've had because it's instructive.
Yep, it's bursting at the seams, the
It
Delray Beach
is.
Garden. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to share, Amy.
Absolutely. Have a good day, Shelly.
You too.
Bye.
Bye bye.